So going down the list in our discovery methods, the next one we'll talk about is the static configuration of a controller on the AP itself. Now each AP will contain or retain a list of primary, secondary, and tertiary controllers in its flash. And if it's in flash, it actually persists across reboots. So even if I reboot the AP, whatever, it's been off for a long time, turns back on, it's always going to remember this. So this is not a dynamic discovery method, it's more of a static manual discovery method. But it's always available to you, and it doesn't rely on anything outside of the AP in terms of being able to at least learn about controllers. So you can configure this either via the CLI or the GUI of the controller. Obviously, to get the initial join working, we would have to do it through the console session of the AP. But once it's actually on the controller, we can configure it from within the controller as well. So from the CLI, you can see the commands we have here. We can either do the CapWAP AP primary base, secondary base, and tertiary base suite of commands. Or there's also another option, I think it kind of came in from a little bit older code, CapWAP AP controller IP address command. Those first two of the CapWAP AP primary base and CapWAP AP controller IP address do pretty much the exact same thing. It just configures a primary controller on the access point. The others obviously configure a secondary and tertiary. And then you can validate the config in the CLI with the show CapWAP client config command. And unfortunately, the entry names for them don't make sense. It's these MWAR names and MWAR IP addresses, but it's up at the top, and we'll show you all those. So let's go ahead and look at configuring this first in the CLI, and then once it's on a controller, we can show you how to configure it from the GUI of the controller. So if I go to my access points, let's go to LAP3. So this one currently isn't figuring out a controller to join. It is, however, getting an IP address. Obviously, we need the IP address to work. So you have to get into enable mode. The default username and password on Cisco APs is Cisco and Cisco. Both username and password are the same. The C in Cisco is capital. The rest of the letters are lowercase. So once I get into enable mode, I can configure the CapWAP client, CapWAP AP IP, why don't I slow down? CapWAP AP controller IP address. I could do that, or I could do the CapWAP AP primary base, secondary base, tertiary base. I'll just go ahead and do this one, CapWAP AP controller IP address, and then the IP address of my controller. Say 10.10.111.10. At this point, now it knows about a controller to reach out to. It should reach out to it and join up to it because we haven't learned it via any other methods. So we start through the discovery process here. It gets an IP address. It's still going to use all the different discovery methods. So it's going to try the layer 3 broadcast, DNS, DHCP. But in addition to those dynamic methods, now we've statically configured a controller for it to reach out to. Here we go, it reached out to it. This is another one of those methods where it's hard to validate that the join request actually went out without actually debugging on the controller. But as I said before, if you want to verify the configuration on the AP itself, it's the show CapWAP, I'll do the long form for you, show CapWAP client config. And it's pretty close to the top. Here's those entries, those MWAR entries, primary, secondary, tertiary. Here we can see that we configured a primary right there. So that's how you can validate that it's actually configured on the AP from the CLI. So now that I'm actually there, let's go ahead and jump on the controller. So HTTPS 10.10.111.10. Yes, I understand the risks. Log in. And then we should see it joined up under the wireless menu up at top. So here's my access point. There's the 1042. If I click in on it, the way I would configure it through the GUI here would be in the high availability tab. So I see it already had the config that I did in the CLI. So I could finish it off with the WLC1, which is the name of this controller. I could configure additional controllers here. WLC2 is 10.10.112.10. WLC 4, 10, 10, 112.20. So now it's primed with 3 different controllers that it will always remember across reboot. So even if the dynamic discovery methods aren't working, I always have these, so it always knows at least some controllers to try to attempt to join to.